On today's episode of Locked On Wild, let's take a look at the numbers to see how the Minnesota Wild primary line combinations are doing so far this season.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we are your team each and every day. We thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we'll take a look at the numbers for the primary line combinations so far for the Minnesota Wild. Some impressive work by the top six, and we'll take a look at what we see with the eye test versus the actual numbers for the third and fourth lines so far. Plus, we'll also take a look at the Tampa Bay Lightning game tonight. Should be a fun one with a couple of high-powered top lines going toe-to-toe here this evening. My name is Seth Topol, host of Locked On Wild since 2021 and credentialed media member. And I got to say, I was way more impressed with these numbers than I thought I would be going in. Looking at all NHL lines, forward lines, we're starting with the offense. We'll talk a little bit about the defense here today as well. But just looking at the forward lines so far throughout the NHL, Kirill Kaprizov, Rossi, and Mats Zuccarello currently sit fourth in the NHL, tied for third with a team that they'll see tonight in Jake Guentzel, Braden Point, and Nikita Kucherov with 7 goals for in the league so far in 6 games played. Now, that equates out to a 5.81 goals for per 60 minutes, which is 10th in the NHL. Matt Boldy, Joel Eriksson Ek, and Marcus Johansson actually have had better numbers so far. Through the 4 games that they have played together at just under 39 minutes, Matt Boldy, Joel Eriksson Ek, and Marcus Johansson have 4 goals for, 0 goals against, and a 6.18 goals for per 60 minutes, which ranks 7th in the NHL right now. So you have 2 of the top 10 line combinations in terms of goals for per 60 minutes so far in the NHL. But I think the thing that is most impressive about even those numbers is that with those 2 lines on the ice in 5-on-5 play, the Minnesota Wild have outscored their opponents 11-1 with those combinations on the ice. Now, obviously, Joel Eriksson Ek missed a couple of games. Marcus Johansson missed some time. And so you haven't had those combinations all together so far this season. But in terms of goals for and goals against, Kirill Kaprizov, Rossi, Mats Zuccarello, 7 goals for, 1 goal against. Matt Boldy, Joel Eriksson Ek, Marcus Johansson, 4 goals for, 0 goals against. And so, top 2 lines getting it done so far this season. Now, beyond that, there are just some questions as to what the other combinations are doing so far for the Minnesota Wild. And so let's go to the numbers. I'm going to peel back because we filtered out a lot of the lines that maybe played like 1 game together and did really well to try to get some obvious patterns as to where things are at. But those 2 primary combinations for the Wild have had tremendous dividends so far in what they've been able to do and what they've been able to limit their opponents in doing. And look, the goals for and the goals against look really good for those 2 lines. The Corsi numbers are on the low side, but let's think about this. the Minnesota Wild have not trailed yet this season. And so they have constantly been facing, especially late in games, teams pushing to try to get back into a game. And so they've faced a lot of possession by opponents and, sometimes early in games. So those numbers will, I think, even out as the season unfolds. But the fact that you've got two lines in the top 10 from a goals for per 60 minutes standpoint means that those two lines are really doing their thing. They're really clicking. They're doing, they're giving you what you need from a scoring perspective. It's just that the bottom six is kind of a head scratcher right now. I don't really know what to make of what we've seen. Now, the Wild have all told used 9 line combinations so far this season. Let's just run through and see where things are at from an expected goals percentage standpoint, expected goals for per 60 minutes to determine kind of the performance that we've seen so far. And it's ironic because the two lines that are producing the highest in metrics and analytics that suggest that it's a good combination are Marcus Foligno, Freddie Gaudreau, Yakov Trenin, and Marcus Foligno, Ryan Hartman, and Yakov Trenin. The expected goals percentage for Matt Boldy, Joel Eriksson Ek, Marcus Johansson is at 57.1%. For Kirill Kaprizov, Marco Rossi, and Mats Zuccarello, it's at 54.3%. For Marcus Foligno, Freddie Gaudreau, Yakov Trenin, it's at 71.4%. So with that line on the ice, 71% of the time, if a goal is scored, it's going to be scored by the Minnesota Wild, which is that's a pretty darn good number. For Marcus Foligno, Ryan Hartman, and Yakov Trenin, it's at 66.7. Now, expectation versus reality is a great counter to what is going on with those combinations. But let's just look at Marcus Foligno, Murat Huznadinov, and Yakov Trenin as well. And their expected goals percentage is at 40%. Their expected goals for per 60 minutes is under 1. Expected goals against per 60 minutes is pretty good at 1.42. That's good defensive numbers, but not doing a ton of scoring from that combination. You've also had Jakub Lauko, Murat Huznadinov, and Freddie Gaudreau. That line has an expected goals percentage of 33.3%, an expected goals for per 60 minutes of 0.48, and expected goals against per 60 minutes of 0.95. The Foligno-Gaudreau-Trenin combination, expected goals for per 60 minutes of 2.14. Not the best offensively, but expected goals against per 60 minutes of 0.86. They're doing really good work defensively, at least by what the numbers tell us. Marcus Foligno, Ryan Hartman, and Yakov Trenin, expected goals for per 60 minutes of 2.5, which is better. Their expected goals against per 60 minutes is 1.25, which is still very, very good. And so it's all about kind of what we see, which is it doesn't look like, compared to where the rest of the team has been at, it just doesn't look like that line is contributing in the same way. And I've seen it pointed out on the broadcast on social media that Foligno and Trenin are supposed to be providing a ton of heavy hits so far this season. Well, let's acknowledge as well that the Minnesota Wild have been winning games without having to play that style of hockey so far. It's not to say that that will be how things will go the entire year, but to this point, the Minnesota Wild have been winning games by playing good, opportunistic offense and by playing really, really solid defense to help their goalie in Philip Gustafsson, who's also been really solid. And so you've got sharp play in all phases, but it isn't like you have needed to be overtly physical to try to assert your will and your dominance over these other teams that are playing. It's been way more about the hockey than it has been about, that physical element. And so I think that leads to Foligno and Trennan both looking kind of like, well, if we're not really doing the hits thing a ton, what do we add to the table? And that's where the defense comes in. And that's why I'm still convinced that, while that line is doing solid things offensive or on defense based off of the metrics, I still am of the belief that that bottom six is going to get a shuffle at some point, because it just needs, I think there just needs to be a little balance to both of those lines offensively, particularly the third, to where you can, push a little bit, as opposed to having that one single line that's like, okay, we're gonna replicate the grief line. We're gonna have a line that can just shut everybody down defensively, but then any offense that you get is a plus. As of right now, all of the lines that are on the ice are playing pretty darn good defensively too. Boldy, Eriksson, Ek, and Johansson has an expected goals against per 60 minutes of 1.85. Kaprizov, Rossi, Zuccarello, they have an expected goals against per 60 minutes of 2.65. And so far, those two lines combined have allowed one goal. So it is interesting to see, but we'll talk about some of the possibilities, as well as taking a look at the defensive numbers too, because those have been very good as well, as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, there is a great way for you to start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out all of the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Plus, you will get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. The Minnesota Wild taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning tonight. And so if you are looking for an opportunity to place that first $5 bet, the Minnesota Wilds currently are plus 134 on the money line, and they are minus 178 in the plus 1.5 goal department. So I would take that plus 134. I think these teams are pretty evenly matched. I would probably take the over at 6.5 in this one, because Marc-Andre Fleury and net could mean that there are more goals scored on the Minnesota Wild here this evening. But the Tampa Bay Lightning have not been juggernauts defensively so far. So those are my picks for tonight. And like I said, doesn't have to be a winner. A $5 bet, your first $5 bet gets you $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So head to FanDuel.com right now to get started with this great offer. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to join us after the game tonight. We'll have you covered with a Locked On Wild postcast. Win or lose, we cruise through a Locked On Wild postcast, keeping you up to date on all the happenings throughout the game, as well as everything that you need to know heading into the next game after today, which is Saturday at noon against the Philadelphia Flyers. So join us after the game tonight, right after the game, and we will have you covered. Before we dive into the defensive numbers, just a couple of notes from Michael Russo today. Jared Spurgeon will fly to Philadelphia tonight and skate with the Minnesota Wild tomorrow. Ryan Hartman, dealing with an upper body injury, is still day-to-day and wasn't at morning skates because he is also sick. So Hartman not in the lineup tonight, which means I think we'll see pretty much the same combinations that we have seen for the last few games. You'll see that bottom six. Although I kind of wonder if we see Foligno, Gaudreau, and Trennan and Lauko, Kuznetsov, and Ogren get an opportunity to maybe build up some chemistry in this one tonight. We'll just have to wait and see how John Hines approaches the lines there. But I wanted to look at the defensive numbers as well, because at the end of the day, I think we will at some point see Marcus Foligno and Yakov Trenin split up to where you put one of them on each line, and maybe you go Foligno, Hartman, and I don't know, maybe Freddie is the wing there, and you go Lauko, Kuznetsov, and Trenin. I don't know, because Lauko and Kuznetsov bring a pretty good speed element to the game, so I'd like to keep them paired together. And so maybe it is that you just have one line that operates at a little slower gear than the rest do. That'll be interesting to see how that plays out here as the season unfolds. Let's look at these defensive numbers for the Minnesota Wild so far. So we had Jonas Brodin and Brock Faber to start the season, and they came in the 44 minutes that they played together. They have an expected goals against per 60 minutes of 0.95, which is great numbers. Now, in terms of actual goals allowed, Brodin and Faber did not allow a goal. We now have seen the uniting of Jake Middleton and Brock Faber, and in 62.2 minutes together, that line combination has not allowed a goal. They have an expected goals against per 60 minutes of 1.64 and an expected goals for per 60 minutes of 2.61. They have been on the ice for 4 goals and 0 goals against. So that combination has been very good so far to start the season. We've also seen Jonas Brodin and Zach Bogosian. They come in with an expected goals against per 60 minutes of 1.02. They've played 5 games. They have 1 goal against in the 5 games that they've played together. They've been on the ice for 2 goals for as well. John Merrill and Declan Chisholm have an expected goals for and expected goals against per 60 minutes of 1.41. 1 goal for, 1 goal against, while they have been out there on the ice together. And Jake Middleton and Jared Spurgeon, 2 games together, they have 2 goals for, but 3 goals against. And so now that I think Middleton has been paired with Brock Faber, who is able to, that pair just works together. And they have been doing some solid work. Brodin and Bogosian has been pretty solid as well. And I think pairing those two with top-level defensemen such as Brock Faber and Jonas Brodin has led to them being able to, not have to try to do what they are capable of. I think is probably the best way to put that. And Merrill Chisholm has been the word that I used in just kind of gearing up for when Denny and I were breaking the game down. Serviceable, I think, is the word to use for Merrill and Chisholm. They haven't hurt you. The metrics are pretty good, and so as long as that continues to be the case, that'll be something that won't rear its ugly head for the Minnesota Wild so far this season. I wanted to find a mix of stats that Brett Marshall put together for Brock Faber, because really, really good stuff. And Brett is, amongst the best that we have here in the state of Minnesota at really diving into the analytics, which is something that, I try, but it's not easy for everybody. And so big props to Brett for putting that all together and making it easily digestible for other podcast hosts like myself. So here's the numbers for Brock Faber so far. Brock Faber sporting a 70.6% expected goals share across his first 5 games. That's the best mark in the NHL amongst all defensemen who have played at least 75 minutes at 5-on-5. Hasn't been on the ice yet for a 5-on-5 goal against. His 1.89 expected goals against is also league leading in those same parameters. Faber's playing fantastic so far this season and really helping key in this defense. We're seeing him take the reins. We're seeing him take the reins as the leader of this defense right before our eyes. And it may be happening a little earlier than we thought. But, as Jared Spurgeon works his way back into the lineup, we're seeing Brock Faber take the reins of this defense and be able to really step up and fill a lot of pressure on that unit. And so while defense so far this season has been very solid, top two line numbers are great. Still a little room, I think, to kind of figure out what to do with the third and fourth lines as we move through the season. So it's going to be another battle tonight, a tough test against a team with just outrageous levels of pedigree. And so we will take a look at tonight's opponent, the Tampa Bay Lightning, to see how the Wild stack up and the areas that will likely decide who goes home a winner as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. All of the best sports are in session right now, with college football getting into the part of the season where we start to really take a look at those playoff teams, plus the NFL moving through the season, the NHL underway, the NBA just got rolling as well. So there are no shortage of opportunities for you to get great seats to see your favorite teams in action here this season. And Game Time can help make the ticket buying experience as stress-free as possible. Think about this. Your ticket buying experience is so stress-free, you can spend more time thinking about where you're going to tailgate, where you're going to go out to eat before the game, or where you are going to go after your team picks up a big win. Plus, Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy. So your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. Think Justin Jefferson will get more than 83.5 yards this week? How about Christian McCaffrey to maybe return to the lineup and run for more than 75.5 yards? Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. And for those of you tuning in last night for the live show, you, I'm sure, saw our community note. Unfortunately, Denny under the weather again for last night's show. And so we made the decision to postpone. We'll see how Denny is feeling as the week rolls on and look to get that one incorporated. Or with the Vikings not playing on Sunday, we'll fire up at noon. We'll let you know. We'll keep you up to date, but appreciate all of the thoughts passed in by the regulars, the everydayers, the comment section, all sending good wishes to Denny. I know he's going to appreciate that. Let's take a look at tonight's matchup. The Tampa Bay Lightning, who come in at 4-2 in the Atlantic Division so far this season. They're coming off of a game against the New Jersey Devils that they won 8-5. But as I said during the postcast, it was a mule kicking because at one point it was 6-2. The Devils with a little battle back to make that one a little more interesting. But if you look at what has happened so far, I'm going to start with the penalty numbers. Tampa Bay Lightning tied with Chicago for 17th in the NHL in terms of penalty minutes. I expected that it was going to be a little bit of a penalty fest against the Florida Panthers and was obviously proved very, very wrong there. But that's good. The Wild playing much more disciplined hockey so far this season is, I think, a big reason as to why they have been able to get out to leads and hold them. It's because they are not beating themselves. And you take way too many penalties. You put yourself in position to where, as John Hines said after the game against the Panthers, you're letting the 5 best players on the team get a chance to just beat you right there. And so the Wild have, as of right now, are 30th in the NHL in penalty minutes per game. Because if you look at the numbers from a power play perspective, Tampa Bay right now is at 16th with a 20.8 power play percentage. But I don't need to remind you the types of names that are on this team that have just been merchants on the power play throughout their career. Nikita Kucherov is really the only name that needs mentioning from a power play perspective. And it's a team that also has the likes of Braden Point. They've got Jake Guentzel, who came in after being traded to the Carolina Hurricanes last year, then signed the big mega deal with the Tampa Bay Lightning to head there. He's great on the power play, but it is a team that just has lethal amounts of scoring throughout their top 6. And Nikita Kucherov off to a great start. He's not only averaging 2 points per game, but over a goal per game as well. 7 goals, 5 assists, 12 total points in 6 games. And we talk about the numbers in terms of best lines in the NHL. Guess who is tied with Kirill Kaprizov, Marco Rossi, and Mats Zuccarello for goals for this season? Jake Guentzel, Braden Point, Nikita Kucherov. They come in with 7 goals for, 3 goals against. Their goals for per 60 minutes is 5.42. Lethal production. And not only that, but you have other players on this team that can certainly beat you as well. The second line combination of Nick Paul, Anthony Cirelli, and Brandon Hagel, they have combined for 8 goals so far this season. Those players have. That line combination specifically has 2 goals for and 1 goal against. But those 3 players have 8 goals apiece. And so this, to me, has all the potential to be a really big slugfest between these 2 games. But look no further than the net. Andrei Vasilevsky, one of the elite goaltenders in the NHL so far this season. Off to a little bit of a slow start, 3-2, with a 3.14 goals against average and an .878 save percentage. In order for the Minnesota Wild to be able to do what they did to Florida, what they've done on the road so far this season, it's the same formula. It is a highly repeatable formula for the Minnesota Wild. Get out to an early lead, take the crowd out of it, and just continue to push. That's what you got to do every time you are on the road. is try to neutralize that home ice advantage. And this is where the goalie thing kind of worries me a little bit, because these guys like Nikita Kucherov, they love to just let it fly from different parts of the ice. Just looking at the most recent game against the the Devils for the Tampa Bay Lightning, looking at the heat map for the Lightning, they had 3 goals right up in close. 3 goals from the face-off circle in. 2 just to the left side of the net, 1 in the left side face-off circle, but they had 2 others in just 5-on-5 play. They had 2 others that were from the perimeter. And so it's a team that can score from anywhere. And so your goalie needs to be on it and able to take those key shots from the face-off circle out as well. And it just I don't know what to expect for tonight's game, because it is going to be, from the sounds of it, it's going to be Marc-Andre Fleury in net for this game to get him ready for his final start in Pittsburgh. And with this Lightning offense, if the Minnesota Wild are going to win this game, I think they're going to have to win it in a similar type score. Obviously not 8-5, but 6-4, 6-5, that kind of thing. And who has the easier chance of being able to put 6 goals on the board? The Lightning with Fleury in net, or the Wild with Andrei Vasilevskiy in net? Is the big question here. Now, the Wild defense has been the best in the NHL, and so that's certainly going to help. I think the defense is really going to need to be on their game tonight to be able to help Marc-Andre Fleury out, to help keep the front of the net clean, and to help keep those lanes of vision open so that he can see the puck coming in from way out beyond, way out from range, so that he can make those saves. Now, all told for Andrei Vasilevskiy, just looking at his numbers against the Minnesota Wild for his career, just wanted to kind of see. Although, let's be honest, it is kind of weird. Like, it's one thing to take a look at an offensive player's career numbers against a team, but like, you don't really get a ton from looking at a goalie's career numbers against a team, because things can change so often throughout the season, like season to season. You have new players coming in. You may have a team that's in the midst of a rebuild. But let's look at the last 3 seasons for Andrei Vasilevskiy. 2022-2023, he started 60 games, 34, 22, and 4, 2.65 goals against average, and a .915 save percentage. He was 20.5 in terms of goals saved above expected. The last 2 seasons, he has been in negative territory. Last year, in 52 games started, he was 30, 20, and 2, 2.90 goals against average, and a 90 save percentage, but negative 5.2 goals saved above expected. And now this year, through 5 games, he's at negative 2.3 goals saved above expected. And so potentially giving the Minnesota Wild a goal here tonight, if those numbers continue. But just for fun, all told, Vasilevskiy 6-4-2 in his career against the Wild, 2.40 goals against average, a .922 save percentage, and 1 shutout. He's allowed 25 even strength goals in the 12 games in his career. So we'll see. I'm telling you, I feel like this is going to be a game in which the Minnesota Wild need to try to beat Andrei Vasilevskiy more than the Lightning beat Marc-Andre Fleury. I have that feeling deep in my bones that this is going to be a higher scoring game than we've seen, but maybe the defense steps up tonight and does their job. And maybe more impressively, even the Wild get off to a really early start and make it so that the Lightning just are playing catch up the entire night. Time will tell. We will have to see how things play out here in this one. Oh, by the way, Marc-Andre Fleury's career numbers against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Fleury is 21, 16, and 4 in his career with a 2.68 goals against average and 902 save percentage. He's allowed 73 even strength goals and 36 power play goals in 45 games. So almost a power play goal per game. So key for tonight, stay out of the box. And we'll see what happens. But as you know, we will have you covered as the game rolls on and once the game is over. That will do it for today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to join us after tonight's game for Locked On Wild postcast, and we'll keep you posted as to when our next live show with Denny will be. Just want to see how he's feeling before we look to reschedule that here, hopefully later this week. So appreciate all the kind words. I'm sure Denny will see those and knows the support. So that's the main thing. And we'll keep you up to date, and we will continue to keep you covered regarding the Minnesota Wild with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.